I'm going to do a history of theatre presentation today on the performance art of pantomime. And it's an art of performance which has existed for many hundreds of years, actually outside of our own social awareness of it, with performances of an ancient pantomime spanning from the end of the 1st century BC until the end of the 6th century AD, where they adapted many popular stories of the time. One of the most famous examples is Virgil's The Aeneid. So the scholar Alexandra Zenobri writes that in its ancient form it was a highly skilled performance where gestures, bodily movements, words, songs and music contributed to stir the emotions of the audience. So here's a picture depicting an ancient Roman theatre performance which I felt really fit into the descriptions of ancient pantomime performance, where we can see a singular dancer interpreting the music of a wider chorus. The word panto meaning all and minos meaning imitator, with a literal translation of we can act anything. While this use of the term in ancient Rome isn't particularly applicable to the modern day performance, Maureen Hughes writes in History of Pantomime that we can actually perhaps attribute or blame, whichever you prefer, the preoccupation with cross-dressing that is prevalent in pantomime to the ancient Greeks and Romans, as for them cross-dressing was of the bacchanalia of their time. So the next significant revelation in the pantomime performance occurred in our very own Lincoln's Inn and Drury Lane theatres in the 18th century. So by the end of the 1600s, the physical and travelling street art of Commedia dell'Arte was actually experiencing a decline in Italy, but it was still quite popular among French companies. So these companies had really popular successes with the audiences of their time, but actually received a backlash from the seemingly jealous Comédie Française, who responded with a royal decree banning the use of speech in the Commedia-style performances. So according to Millie Taylor in her book British Pantomime Performance, it was these companies of dancing, tumbling, mute harlequins that appeared in England first in fairs. So the plot of such comedies was communicated to the audience through the medium of slapstick and dance, and omitted any form of dialogue, and demonstrated a misunderstanding which resulted in a comedic brawl. So I found it incredibly interesting to hear about certain performances where I could observe familiar tropes of pantomime in the modern day. So an example being a performance of Harlequin Dr. Faustus in 1723, where one can observe the practice of adapting modern and well-known stories. Another example being a 1721 performance of King Lear called The Magician, which according to Taylor was topical, used satirical songs, and established the pattern which pantomime was to follow. So the archetypal commedia character of Harlequin, the light-hearted, nimble comic servant, became a favourite of playgoers. This character was developed most famously in the 1800s by Joseph Grimaldi, who seemed to embody the freedom and liberty of the English spirit in comparison to its French counterpart of the time, through his extraordinary physical comedy where he invented tricks and general buffoonery, a famous example being the butter slide, where one would put butter on the floor and slip on it and fall, and result in laughs from the audience. So, as the Industrial Revolution took hold, a flood of workers bombarded major cities, encouraging the opening of new and active theatres to satisfy the demand from workers. So I thoroughly enjoyed a personal visit to the Victorian Albert Museum up in London, where they have extensive archives of costumes, posters and various aspects of the British pantomime performance, as it evolved through the Victorian period into the modern day. So in this period of the 19th century, the harlequinades died out, the pantomime stories such as Cinderella and Peter Pan began to be developed and were reworked by writers like H.J. Byron and J.R. Planché. They became a popular evening entertainment associated with Christmas due to their festive and fun and family-orientated nature. And the focus on puns and wordplay became very prevalent as the costumes, transformations, scene changes became really elaborate and spectacular at the time, which allows us to arrive at the modern day style of the performance, where we have a theatrical entertainment at the heart of British culture, which involves music, topical jokes, slapstick comedy, and is adapted from fairy tales and nurseries that are extremely popular. So in the modern day we have slapstick comedy, cross-dressing, topical humour, direct address of the audience participation, hyperbolic gesture, innuendo, heightened facial expression, music and dance elements incorporated into the piece, and elaborate makeup and costume. And as you can see from this picture here, this elaborate lady is actually played by a man. His name is Andrew Pollard, and is the director of the Greenwich Theatre's annual Christmas pantomime.
I think that's what he said. If you're a dame, you've got certain kind of feminine traits, or the outward appearance with the boobs and the dress, but there's a robustness about a dame. And you're a clown, essentially, I think. That's how I play it. I think, although you've got women's clothes up, you are a clown. Whereas I think in female impersonators, it's the illusion that you want people to think you're a woman. Not prepared with just...
So I found it really interesting watching Andrew Pollard discuss how the Dame was meant to be performed. And now for my practical physical exploration, I'm going to be looking at the movement of the Dame, in particular her often fabulous entrances on stage. So as a performer initially approaching an entrance on stage where I'm a well-known and well-liked character by the families attending the performance, I would probably enter on stage quite respectfully, holding broad shoulders, a nice respectable hand gesture in the middle, and lift up my chin so that everyone can see me and I'm portrayed as really confident. But I found it really interesting when Andrew Pollard was discussing the robustness of the Dame, and I felt that if I were to be a woman approaching the role, I would actually have to attain quite masculine characteristics so that there was a comedy in the conflict between the gender roles. So I probably would change my entering role into something like this. This allows me to be easily more perceptible to the audience members watching. I'm also highlighting my waist, so showing my female characteristics, but I'm also sticking out my chest, broadening my shoulders, and having a fixed, quite masculine, confident stance on the floor. I'm directly addressing the audience with my hand, calling them into my open body language, and I'm looking quite confident and approachable as a character. So Pollard discusses that robustness and a playful confidence in clowning that I further encountered in Spotlight's How to Audition and Act in Pantomime, which says that you always have to remember that unlike most conventional plays or performances with pantomime, there is no fourth wall. Principal characters, especially the Dame and the Silly Billy type characters, plus the fairy and the villain, often have to address the audience directly and interact with them. So I also decided to alter my approach to facial expressions as a character playing the Dame. So the Dame often has elaborate makeup. For me as a performer, I would probably rely on this to drawing the audience's attention. And if I were to do a laughing pose, I'd probably just do something quite like this and hold it and expect that to be alright, relying on my facial makeup to make me look quite interesting as a character. However, from this kind of confident assertion that there is no fourth wall in pantomime, I decided to alter this pose into something like this. From this, I'm actually interacting more with the audience. I'm holding out my hand to them so they feel that there's more interaction going on. I'm again highlighting quite feminine characteristics by touching my chest, but I'm also having a quite ugly, very exaggerated face where my mouth is turned down and my nose is scrunched, and albeit that is a laughing pose, there is quite a certain amount of ugliness which you would be expecting from a female character. So I'm now going to display my physical demonstration by performing Widow Twanky's The Dame's Entrance in Stuart Arden's Panto version of Aladdin, which is a popular oriental retelling of the famous love story filled with magic and genies. Oh, I thought you said he was a banana. Oh no, there's no banana there, darling. Oh, he's not very fruity, that one. Anyway, go inside. I'm just going to catch some rays. Okay. So to break that down for you, I'm quite confidently interacting with the audience, as I've said before. I kind of pointed over there, and again retaining female characteristics. I also squinted, so setting myself in that area where there's a lot of sun, where Aladdin is set in an Arabian country. I'm also quite confidently holding really exaggerated facial expressions, and I was playing a lot with my voice there. So making it go from quite high pitch to quite low. I also played with the idea of the innuendo being written in with the banana, and the way that I wagged my finger made me look like quite a confident but playful character. The way that I came back over here the reason that I opened up my legs when sitting down is because there's often that association that women shouldn't open up their legs. So that's playfully remaining with the idea that I'm actually a man playing a woman. And again, broadening out my body language made me look quite more masculine, and also quite open, so that I'm quite easily, again, perceptible to the audience. So learning about pantomime has given me a lot as a performer, because it's reminded me of how confidence is extremely important when approaching any type of role, and that even if you're playing a shy character, it's very useful to understand how confidence plays into everything that you do, in terms of committing to something, putting yourself on the line as a performer. And I feel that this is quite noticeable in quite modern 20th century styles of performance, so particularly things like performances like Stephen Burkoff, who have really hyperbolic gestures, and you have to confidently commit to everything that you do. And I also found it quite interesting how there are parallels between pantomime and actually ballet, where you have to really play with who you are as a character and stick to quite archetypal figures when approaching each character that you're playing, with elaborate movements and interesting facial features. So thank you.